Awesome, Kelly. Thanks so much. That's right. Right now, we're welcoming on our very own Noi Mahoney. And Noi, we have some updates, of course, with Borderlands, starting it off with ITS Logistics, and they're making a pretty substantial investment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and let's jump right into it. What are we seeing here?
Yes, ITS Logistics has opened a $100 million facility in Fort Worth, Texas. The Nevada-based 3PL said the 1.1 million square foot logistics center will help the company focus on a new special cargo heavy haul division that they say they're going to be focusing on cross-border shippers in the aerospace, manufacturing, and oil and gas industries, specifically for freight moving between the corridors of, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas, as well as up from the south, up from Mexico. So ITS says they're seeing big opportunities with cross-border shippers and Gulf Coast facilities as more shippers sort of transition away or sort of move away from the West Coast ports and see opportunities in the Gulf region.
So, Noi, it's great to see you here on the show today. And as we know, of course, that Texas Triangle, as they call it, the Houston to Austin, San Antonio to Dallas Triangle, is really kind of a hotbed right now, especially when we look at those cross-border shippers. It's, of course, right on that I-35 corridor. And the location of this Fort Worth facility is especially good for ITS because you are close to both FedEx and UPS hubs. You're close to the Fort Worth Alliance Airport. You are right next to a BNSF rail yard, and you're right on that I-35 corridor. When it comes to this type of prime logistics warehouse and logistics space real estate, there's not a whole lot of it in the Fort Worth area. So do you think that it's part of their growth strategy to really kind of snap up the maximum amount that they could and make sure that they hold it pretty strong as they see these opportunities continue to expand?
Yeah, as you mentioned, real estate, especially commercial real estate across Texas, is getting more and more scarce, especially in prime places such as Dallas and Houston, and this is quite a substantial investment for ITS. I think, as I mentioned, it's their first facility in Texas. It's at around $100 million investment. It's quite a large facility, 1.1 million square feet. So some of the things I'm noticing are, as you mentioned, when companies do open logistics facilities, somewhere in Texas, they tend to be they're getting quite large with quite a substantial financial investment. So we're seeing bigger and bigger facilities being snapped up and quite quickly.
And Noi, what's some of the other news that you're hearing from Lineage Logistics? Also some activity going on there in the Borderlands as well.
Yeah, that sort of follows what we were just talking about. Lineage Logistics just opened a very large cold storage facility in Houston. The facility is their 20th, I believe, in Texas, and that also is part of what officials for Lineage said is more freight moving away from the West Coast ports. They see big opportunities in the Gulf Coast region. Lineage, just a few weeks ago, opened a large cold storage facility in the Dallas area. So they have Dallas, now Houston, as two prime locations across Texas. Their 19th and 20th facilities in the state of Texas.
Tails perfectly into our next topic here. We've got some October port numbers coming out of the Gulf Coast ports, specifically in the Texas area. And we know, of course, Port Houston, the port in Corpus Christi, and in Brownsville are all pretty big when it comes to oil, gas, and the steel trade there. Are those commodities still things that dominated imports and exports through October?
Yeah, Port of Corpus Christi, which is one of the largest export ports for crude oil, had a pretty strong month in terms of exports. I think they exported about 9 million tons of crude oil. Interestingly, the Port of Corpus Christi was down slightly overall in terms of total tonnage and shipments. It was the first time this year, 2023, that they were down. It was barely down. They were down less than 1%. So the decrease at the port of Corpus Christi was caused by a downturn or decrease in imports of crude oil. So interestingly, maybe the oil and gas industry or some other heavy industries in Texas didn't need as much crude oil in the month of October. And so we saw a slight downturn in imports, but the port of Corpus Christi is still showing strong exports. There's still a high demand for Texas oil, I guess, in the global economy.
As we continue to see issues at the Panama Canal, getting things like LNG ships through the canal, as well as the continued conflict in the Middle East. And when it comes to Port Houston, they might have been doing okay with the Gulf Coast when it comes to oil exports, but Port Houston continuing to see sequential declines in their container traffic. What does that look like, and what does that tell us kind of about the bigger, broader container economy?
Yeah, Port Houston saw declines in, I think it was about a 2% decline in year-over-year container traffic compared to October, 2022. They also saw declines in imports of steel, which tells me anyway that the oil and gas industry in Texas is slowing down just a little bit. Usually when you see high steel import numbers, that means the oil and gas industry needs, all this materials that they use to dig for oil and gas. And the officials at Port Houston said it's really not decreased year over year. It was just that last year, 2022, was sort of an extraordinary year in terms of demand for, containers and steel and other products. But for the third straight month, we're seeing, year-over-year container traffic slow down at Port Houston. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a trend that keeps going forward, or if Port Houston rebounds, early next year into 2024.
And Noi, sticking somewhat to the region, can you give us some updates on what's happening over in the Port of New Orleans and what's going on with their volumes?
Yeah, interestingly, the Port of New Orleans saw an uptick in container traffic, which has surprised me just a little bit, because usually when you see, Port Houston and Port of Corpus Christi sort of slow down, the other Gulf ports sort of follow. But the Port of New Orleans had a strong month. I think they were up 6% or something like that year over year in container traffic. They saw steel and coffee and chemical and other plastics were the big commodities that passed through the Port of New Orleans. So we surprisingly saw a good solid month for them for the month of October.
We continue to see issues with the Mississippi River and the upstream traffic from that. Noi, thank you for joining us this morning. And of course, we will hear from you next week, and we can catch your Borderlands article on Saturday.
Thank you so much.